Are you noticing it? This is something that has fascinated me ever since I was young. The regression in architecture. I was quite obsessed. I'd often ask people, am I the only one seeing it? Don't you also see that? People would give various explanations. Some would say, well, I actually think it's the modern style that looks better. To which I'd respond, but just look at the difference in attention to detail. The lack of care. Or they'd say it's the survivor bias, essentially. Obviously what's left are only the most beautiful buildings. Or they'd say, we can't afford to build beautiful anymore. Back then, we were rich, now we're poor. None of these explanations rang true to me. I mean, even the landmark buildings of today are usually an eyesore. Whereas I don't really recall ever going past an old building and thinking that. And the same goes for all arts. If you walk down the Vatican gallery, you start with paintings of Michelangelo, and you end up looking at something that could have been drawn by a kindergarten student. And also the way people dress. So, I thought I was onto something, but that was no discovery yet. Times got worse. That's an opinion, not a discovery. It felt like there was something more to the mystery still. Then I came across a book, Sex and Culture, by Joseph D. Unwin. In it, he studies the sexual regulations of many different societies, many different cultures. And he comes to a striking conclusion that whenever a society drops premarital chastity, within 3 generations, it gets conquered. That's quite a conclusion, isn't it? That book came out 100 years ago. And well, look at us now. In the West, we got free love. And what else did we get? Multiculturalism. Meaning less and less of our culture, more and more of other cultures. Usually more conservative ones. Our power and importance in the world are waning. So it would seem that we're in the midst of some kind of a huge phenomenon that no one really talks about. Lack of care, free love, getting silently conquered. What is this phenomenon? Unwin made one more observation. He tied the cultural condition to the society's willingness to erect temples. Well, that's another thing that we stopped doing in the West. We became less religious. So, what is all of this, and why are all of these things linked? The religious aspect was especially interesting to me, because what does it have to do with all the rest? I thought about it, and I asked myself, what's the fundamental difference between a religious and a non-religious person? And I don't mean stuff like whether or not to eat fish on Fridays, but their worldview. Something they could fight for. Something they could die for. Certainly there's been a thing or two in the history of Europe that we fought over. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church was battling heresies. Then, in later years, sort of a new heresy emerged: Socialism. So, I read their texts, and what surprised me was how on the nose they often were regarding what they didn't like about religion. They'd cite specific biblical passages. You'll be able to see for yourselves. Let's start by quickly going over the biblical story, the Genesis. It was something like this. Many, many years ago, our ancestors were living this childlike existence. We were basically still animals at this point. The man and his wife, Adam and Eve, were both naked, and they were not ashamed. But then, something happened. Our eyes opened. We gained the knowledge between good and evil. We gained consciousness. Was it a good thing or was it a bad thing? Well, a good thing, obviously. We gained advantage over animals. We were able to tame many beasts, eradicate many diseases. But it was a bad thing as well. With consciousness comes responsibility. Merely following our instincts was no longer good enough. We now had to work and make plans and make sacrifices. God says, "In painful toil you will eat of the ground all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, but you will eat the grain of the field by the sweat of your brow." That's the price we pay for consciousness. We have to think ahead and often sacrifice the immediate gratification in favor of a long-term benefit. And what if our sacrifice was wrong? That's what the very next story is about. That of Cain and Abel. And the story is all this time. Person A makes a correct sacrifice. Person B, for whatever reasons, it's actually not revealed in the story. Person B makes an incorrect sacrifice. Abel is rewarded in life. Cain is not. And Cain gets angry. God says, "Why are you angry? And why is your expression downcast? Is it not true that if you do what is right, you will be fine?" But Cain doesn't listen. Instead of reflecting on his own behavior, he continues to be angry, and eventually kills his own brother. God says, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. Now you are banished from the ground." Cain's behavior gets condemned. So, what can we say is the moral of these stories? Well, it goes something like this. Embrace your consciousness and the responsibility that comes along with it. Make full use of your consciousness to make the wisest, most prudent sacrifice today for a better tomorrow. Now, let's have a look at one medieval heresy, brethren of the free spirit. They say, regeneration is the return to the state of innocence in which Adam lived before he sinned. Because Adam's sin was to eat the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Right, so it's the polar opposite message here. We were better off before we gained the knowledge of good and evil. Another one of their texts says, we take the service of the four elements in all the ways that nature has needs, without the reproach of reason. A similar message can be found in Socialist texts. In the state of morals, which the author is advocating for, one will neither think nor reason, because no one will have any need to do this any longer. Again, it's the opposite to what we'd heard before. Now, what about making sacrifices? Again, coming back to the heresy of the free spirit. For just as it is right, in the life of the spirit, to do everything contrary to their will, if they do not want to lose their peace, so, on the contrary, the free do everything that pleases them, if they do not want to lose their peace. Right, so the message here is that if you're free, you should listen to your senses rather than your mind, and do what's pleasant in the moment rather than think ahead. Socialists famously blame the bourgeoisie for people's misfortunes. But know, dear friends, that for you, the most evil and true devils, you have no worse and no more evil enemies than the noble and the rich. People ought to possess all wealth and riches of the earth together, and on equal terms, and also use them together and equitably. No unhappy people would be seen on earth, whereas at present we come across them on every hand. So it's no longer every person should be responsible for their own fate. Now it's the system that should take care of you. Now, going back to the architecture, a trend of simplification can be observed for socialist buildings. A similar trend can be seen in Protestant churches. Can it be that by rejecting consciousness, one also gets rid of their ability? Interestingly, you see descriptions of apathy relating to both heretical and socialist societies. Apathy, an impious deception has appeared that corrupts the spirit of simple people and maintains that they should remain unmoved by both the passion of Christ and the suffering of their fellow man. And they say, God leads everything to the best choice. Mikhail Geller writes about the Soviet Union. Homo Sovieticus obediently complies with commands emanating from the authorities. He seeks to frustrate the actions of those who break the customary norms of behavior. He fully supports his leadership. The individual thus turns into a child, for whom the state replaces parents and friends. Joseph D. Unwin also makes a similar observation regarding the societies he studied. He writes, if the social regulations compel no sexual continence, as egoistic, dead level of conception, culture is the result. The people possess the power of reason, but they do not apply it to the world of their experience. Such a society will erect a bridge, and so long as the bridge bears the weight imposed upon it, the men who made it are content. Is it something that we're witnessing in our modern world? It would seem that we've moved to a more basic level of forms. Function over form. We no longer strive for the best possible, but rather a basic minimum. It's a regression to the animal world in a sense. Now, what about the sexual regulations? Loosening up was observed, again, both in the heretical and socialist societies. They thought of the virtue of charity in such a broad sense that they ensured that every act regarded as a sin ceased to be so if it was performed out of charity. This is why they devoted themselves, in the name of charity, to debauchery, adultery, and all the other pleasures of the body. Two godfathers of socialism, Marx and Engels, wrote, "Monogamy arose from the concentration of great riches in a single hand, that of the man, and from the need to bequeath these riches to the children of that man, and not of any other." A report from the Soviet Union says, "Today, marriage between Komsomol members hardly ever takes place. For a Marxist it would seem that the very fact of sexual intercourse should testify to matrimonial relations." And it all makes sense if you think about it. Because what's the strongest pleasure there is? Well, sexual pleasure would be near the top of the list for many people. And then, what's the reason to reject it? Oh, something like building a stable family, building a stable environment for your children. So, in a way, it's the ultimate pleasure versus the ultimate sacrifice. A sacrifice that not even you will reap the rewards of, only your children will. And it shouldn't be surprising that, as if on cue, we get the reports of falling birth rates. Why do you take wives but refuse to beget offspring, whence stems the human race? He replied, "If the whole human race should agree not to experience corruption, the human race would be begotten like bees without coition." And a report from the Soviet Union says, "The birth statistics of the last decade show a rapid decrease in the average size of families. The family with 1 or 2 children is beginning to predominate." So, yeah, I think that's really it. I tried to sum it up as succinctly as I could. The topic could be explored much deeper, of course. But yeah, let me know if you think I'm onto anything, and if it was interesting. And take care.